a good faith basis to bring these charges, that they had the evidence to do so. Of course, there's the old adage that the grand jury will indict a ham sandwich. The burden is it's easy to get.
The idea of that is that the people in the grand jury are being presented information from trained prosecutors who know how to get the indictment. I mean, is that what the meaning of that is?
Yeah.
Indict a ham sandwich when you hear that, right?
Right.
That's what that means,
legally,
right?
They consider legally sufficient evidence and reasonable cause to believe that a crime was committed by that individual. That's all.
Yeah.
Right. So it's a much lesser burden in the grand jury to get an indictment. And when I was an ADA, I was presenting case after case after case in front of the grand jury, and it's almost like a process, and it's something which you control the narrative in many ways as the prosecutor. You are the voice in that grand jury in terms of presenting the evidence, and because of that, the defendant, it's also just charges, right? That presumption of innocence. Donald Trump maintains that. These are just charges. Even though a grand jury votes, it's not a conviction. He still has the presumption of innocence here. The prosecution still needs to prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt. And I would imagine that Alvin Bragg, if he was really making sure that this was thought out and this was a process and a prosecution or an endeavor that he was seeking that's going to be possibly successful, I would imagine that they have thought through that, and I hope they have.
I mean, I take that for granted, honestly. Yeah. There's no doubt the stakes of this case. You know what I mean? I mean, for sure. And again, and we're getting, here it is. This is some pictures, still images from inside the courthouse. This is the first look we're getting at Donald Trump, flanked by attorneys and court officers. This happened within the last half hour. He is continuing to be in the courtroom as we speak, maybe a little bit longer than people had anticipated. He's been in there since
2:20 or so.
Yeah, 2:19, 2:20. So he's been in there almost 25 minutes at this point.
2:30. And when we should know any moment, we should know very soon what exactly those charges are. This is the first time that Donald Trump is even learning what charges have been brought up against him. We'll find out the severity of those charges as well. And then we'll have a press conference from Alvin Bragg at 3:30 Eastern time talking about their evidence behind this.
Yeah, it's going to be sort of an interesting visual. You're going to have Alvin Bragg on one side of your screen, and invariably it's going to be the motorcade or the flight taking off, heading back to Florida of the former president. So certainly, from a visual standpoint, really just a stunning, historic day here in New York City. But again, on the right side of your screen, that is the first image released of the former president in the courtroom where he continues to be at this moment. On the left side of your screen, that's a pool camera set up in the hallway outside the courtroom. We saw him briefly walk into the courtroom at around 2:29. He remains in there right now, and then we're going to see him head back out, head down to the elevator, head to his waiting car. He did not say anything on his way in. He looked very somber, very glum, very businesslike as he headed into the courtroom, as he looks like in the picture as well on the right side. So any moment now we're about to see the reverse as he exits the courthouse in the courtroom with his attorneys, and it'll be again interesting. We heard reporters yelling down the hallway, Mr. Trump, do you have any comment? He did not say a word as he was led into the courtroom itself.
And it's just very interesting. A year ago this week, it seemed like this case was dead in the water. And now here we are, a former president for the first time being arraigned, facing indictment. And once we learn what those charges are and just how severe they are, we can figure out the next steps. But also learning to see if the judge invokes a gag order, what he can and can't talk about, how he's going to react to this too, what he's going to do with if there's a mugshot taken, what his team could do with that too. I mean, he's been wanting to drum up support from his base. I think so far the number was $8 million have been donated to his campaign. Just how Donald Trump will use this as his narrative as he's done in the past, too, for the campaign.
Right, and as we mentioned yesterday, basically, since this happened, the GOP 2024 nominee has come to a complete halt.
Frozen in place.
Everyone who's even running against him has to line up behind him in support while he goes through this. Now, we know this is a situation that's going to play out probably over at least a year or so, and there are other potential legal issues he's facing as well elsewhere in the country. So a lot of calculations certainly on his part about how he plays this going forward, appealing to his supporters, et cetera, as he right now is obviously the clear runaway frontrunner for the GOP 2024 nomination. I mean, it's not even close.
Yeah.
And I just want to point out, looking at this photo, you see, there's been a sort of a question mark. Who is going to speak during the arraignment for Donald Trump? Of course, Joe Tacopina has been very vocal in media reports and the press. I know Joe Tacopina, but you see the mic is in front of Todd Blanche. That was the attorney that he just tapped in on his team. To Todd Blanche's left is Susan Nicholas. She is also on his team, a great attorney. And then there's Donald Trump, and to Donald Trump's left, there's Joe Tacopina, also a very well-versed and experienced defense attorney. So there you have the team, but based on the seating, right, you typically have the speaking attorney in front of the mic, but also on the right of the defense team.
We have breaking news now. Donald Trump has pleaded not guilty to 34 felony counts. So the reporting that came out late last night was accurate. 34 felony counts. Walk us through what you hear as an attorney when you hear 34 felonies.
I mean, that's substantial. That's, I mean, I mean, that's the sort of 34 felonies. See, I thought this was my take, that we were going to see a mix of felonies and misdemeanors. But if it is 34 felony counts, then Donald Trump is facing a sizable indictment there. I mean, there's 34 counts, I get that, but there was a lot of talk about, will Alvin Bragg come out with simply a misdemeanor charge or a misdemeanor indictment, which is typically not done. Misdemeanors are not normally presented to a grand jury and indicted, but that was something that Alvin Bragg could arguably have done or ended up with. But now we hear 34 felony counts is something which is quite substantial for Donald Trump. And you have to think that now his defense team is attacking not one felony count, which is something which is no one wants to experience or face in itself, but 34 felony counts to attack as the defense team there, and 34 counts that Donald Trump is facing as former president. It's mind-boggling how we've gotten here, but it's something we never have seen. But now the real burden, and of course there's always the burden on the prosecution, but I would say the burden is all the more great just from a public perception standpoint on Alvin Bragg and the Manhattan DA's office to show that this is a indictment that was reached based on the law and the evidence and not motivated by politics, as many people who are criticizing Alvin Bragg and his office are saying.
Now, how does it work? I mean, obviously, as a former president, he put people on the federal bench, on the Supreme Court. How do the rulings work that are handed in Manhattan criminal court? Does that ever get to the feds or no? Or how, this is one of those interesting entanglements that comes with indicting a former president.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, obviously, these are state charges. We've talked about how the enhancement of that misdemeanor could be tied to a federal question of whether an election law and a federal crime was committed and how that will play out. But essentially, what is the appeals process here? So let's say if there is an appeal, it's going from the state Supreme.
As you can see, we are now into this press conference here on Live Now from Fox. I am Andy Mack. This is a live look as our shot just went down of our Fox 5 team, as we have multiple shots out there. I also want to put up this shot right now here outside of the courtroom as well. As we are continuing to wait here for a press conference and also potentially former President Donald Trump to walk out of here, of course, we are learning new information that Donald Trump has pled not guilty to 34 felony counts. We're also seeing the first images inside the courtroom there in Lower Manhattan. We also saw Alvin Bragg inside the courtroom as well. This is a live picture right there. as we're also awaiting a press conference coming up very, very momentarily with Alvin Bragg as well. This is just inside the courtroom. I want to continue to put up multiple shots here on Live Now from Fox.
I think it's still frozen from the earlier shot.
As you can see, the two shots we're looking at right now inside the courtroom, and also awaiting the press conference of Alvin Bragg. Soon we'll have this coming up very momentarily as they will likely step out. We're also going to tune back into our Fox 5 team as they are continuing to cover this as well. So we are waiting for all of these shots here on Live Now from Fox. You can see plenty of media presence out there as well. We want to put up just some more shots of what we're seeing from this inside this Manhattan courtroom, this Manhattan courthouse.